welcome back to Indieventure Extra, our bonus series where we interview key members of the games industry. My guest today is a UK games writer whose words have featured in some of the world's most prestigious publications, including GamesRadar, Kotaku and Edge magazine. After a short but sweet tenure at the now sadly defunct Wireframe magazine, my guest now works for Mirror Gaming. You may also recognise him from his brief stint as the on-screen host for Push Square's YouTube channel, a role that saw him collaborate with a familiar-looking sad northerner on videos about PlayStation 5 firmware updates. Here to talk about his upcoming book, 50 Indie Games That Changed the World, please welcome to the podcast my former brother in PlayStation, Aaron Potter. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Liam. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're back. It's been nearly 3 years, I think, since we were last in some kind of audio-visual content together. It feels like not a day's passed.
I know. It's funny. It's a funny old industry because sometimes you're like ships passing in the night. 1 minute your brother's in PlayStation, the next you're not. One moment your brother in PlayStation defects, and then you have to kind of get used to that. But I'm glad you started that off at the back because I was going to make some reference to it eventually.
Absolutely.
Come on, classic moment.
I mean, let us not forget who sent me the job advert for Rock Paper Shotgun's video producer.
Oh, was that me?
If you remember, it was you. I remember exactly where I was. I was in a Thai restaurant in Newcastle, and I got a text from you that was just the link to the Gamer Network job listing and the message, you could be the next Matthew Castle.
Oh, there you go. And have you forgiven me after sending you that job listing?
I don't regret it for a second, my friend. So yeah, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you about your book, which is coming out. Well, it'll be out by the time this podcast goes live, but it's been out since the 20th of August. You've been writing it for a long time now, right? It's been a few years.
Yeah, so you mentioned it like during the intro there, but once upon a time I used to be features editor for a magazine that me and you both love, Wireframe magazine.
I miss it all the time. Yeah,
yes,
such a good mag.
Same here. And it's funny, obviously I only played a small part in it full time, but the editor Ryan Lambie actually contacted me to freelance for it before it launched. So I always like held that as kind of an honor. And but basically, yeah, that magazine was being sunset at the end of 2023 or end of 2022, and that was a very indie focused magazine, as well as like game development, B2B stuff. So knowing that my next job probably wouldn't involve a lot of indie game coverage because SEO, I was kind of looking for an avenue to like keep that up, and the book ended up being that, so it worked out quite well.
Well, we'll have a lot to talk about with that, but before we do, I like to ask this to any games journalists who come on the podcast. Have you been playing any indie games this year that have particularly stood out? Any personal favourites from 25 so far?
Yeah, I mean, I could make the probably expected joke of, is Claire Obscure Expedition 33 an indie game? How many people made that thing?
Here he is.
Oh, what's going on here? But I guess it's AA, but we could argue that until the cows come home. But it's funnily enough, an indie game I'm enjoying a lot, I haven't actually got around to finishing yet, is called Fretless, The Wrath of Rifson.
What is this?
Not sure if you're familiar with it, Liam.
I'm not, actually. I'm going to Google it while you tell me about it.
Yeah, go for it. So I actually demoed it at a Gamescom a couple of years ago. It's made by a really small team. It's basically like a top-down sort of adventure, turn-based RPG, where instead of traditional attacks using swords and bows and arrows and all that kind of fun stuff, your main weapons are guitars and instruments. Oh. And so it's kind of like a melding of all kinds of different genres. And it does share a bit in common with Claire Obscure in that its battle system, although card-based, your different attacks are different riffs depending on the instrument you have.
Oh.
But the better the button tap, the better the timing around the attack, the more damage your attacks will do. So it's just a really charming Zelda-style turn-based RPG. I know Zelda isn't a turn-based RPG, but if you just visualize what the old school Zelda games look like. So yeah, I haven't finished it yet. It's not a very long game, but I'm always jumping between the next AAA things, but it's perfectly plays on Steam Deck, which is pretty much a prerequisite for indie gaming for me these days.
Agreed.
And I've not seen too many others talk about it. So, show Fretless, The Wrath of Rifson some love. I think it's a really good game.
It looks fantastic. It was such a good shout. And when I was looking there on Steam, it has overwhelmingly positive reviews. It's one of these like classic, you haven't heard anyone in games media talk about it, but people have found it and think a lot of it. So that's a great rec. I'm going to have to really check that out.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it, regardless of if you like, music games or not. There's a bit of that because basically your special attack is called a crescendo, and that's when it sort of enters the more Guitar Hero there's a runway, and then you time your button attacks. But the cool thing about it is, I believe there's 4 different guitars and weapons. They can all be modded, which act as your like passive and active buffs. But you start off with an acoustic guitar, then you move to like an electric keyboard, bass guitar, and depending on which instrument you're using, the music of the game during battle, the sort of battle theme will change accordingly. So it's like the little details that indie games are always good at.
That's nice. That sounds good. As a musician yourself, does it do anything that like appeals to the musician side of your brain? Anything you've noticed that's like, oh, that's a good observation?
I mean, it is very tongue-in-cheek in terms of its story. I mean, there's the usual sort of turn of there's a battle of the bands that you need to compete in, but its message is kind of, at least so far, like the bad guy of the game, quote unquote, the titular Riffson, is kind of like a record label exec, and you're sort of fighting for the independent musician. So in that way, I think it's really good. And again, it's just the details, like guitar pedals will make your attack stronger in a certain way, and
that's fun.
You're arranging your riffs to a certain degree to make sure you get the best order, because you can line up 3 riffs during one turn. So I don't know. It's tough being a musician out there, and I like to see a game, because it would have been easy just for this team to like do a Guitar Hero, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that they're trying to transplant music cornerstones onto a different type of game, I think is really fun. So yeah.
Oh, it sounds fantastic.
You asked for it.
Yeah.
Don't blame me if I break your wallet.
Yeah. You could have just spoke about Clair Obscura and I would have let you. So it's nice to have something different.
Have you played Clair Obscura?
I have. Yeah, finished it. Yeah, really love that game. Probably my favorite of the year, I think, so far.
Not an original opinion, but I think I'm there with you, dude.
Yeah. Oh, I've never had an original opinion in my life, Aaron. That's not what I'm known for.
You have 7 out of 10 games good. There you go. Play more 7 out of 10 games. That's a Liam special, that.
Oh, it was kind of my whole personality for a number of years there. So let's rewind the clock quite a lot here. And I'd love to know, when Aaron was a child, what are your earliest memories of video games? Can you remember which games made you fall in love with the medium, the ones that captivated you as a kid?
Yeah, of course. Again, like, your memory's like an interesting thing, right? I think your memory can lie to you. But my earliest sort of recollection of playing video games is when I was around about 4 or 5 years old, and my mum I didn't know it was a hand-me-down, but for Christmas one year, I got a Sega Mega Drive with Sonic the Hedgehog on it. So, and pretty much from that day onward, I was kind of like, what? This is like a cartoon, but you can make the character move? Where has this been all my life? My short life of 4 to 5 years. I need more of this. So I just remember playing so many Sega Mega Drive games as a kid. Streets of Rage 2, Golden Axe, Sonic the Hedgehog, all those classics, even some like really bad licensed games. Like there was an Incredible Hulk game that my dad bought alongside FIFA 98 or whatever the FIFA was on Sega back in the day. But obviously when you're a kid, you don't know what a bad game is really. You're just impressed by anything that lets you be powerful and live out a fantasy. So that was my earliest memory. And then from there, I kind of fell onto the PlayStation track, which obviously, as you know very well, would probably become relevant career-wise much later on down the line. With the PS1, playing games like Tekken 2. I remember playing a lot of fighting games when I was younger.
Oh, really?
Because when you're a kid, you're always going around other people's houses and, you're trying to find multiplayer games, and fighting games were just always there. Everybody always owned one fighting game.
Yeah, very true. Yep.
And on the PS1, it was either Tekken 2 or Tekken 3. And Tekken 3 I remember preferring because, as well as being able to spam Law's sort of bicycle kick thing over and over again. Classic. Oh, you're going to pick Eddie Gordo. I'm going to pick Law. Let's see who can swing their legs the fastest. But Tekken 3 has that beat 'em up mode where to get health back, you have to collect chicken. And every time you collect chicken, a voice goes, chicken. And I just remember that being very fun and memorable. I can't remember that at all. You need to look that up.
I do, yeah.
Tekken 3 should release that as a standalone mode. I think it's got its own name, but a giant panda walking through streets and eating chicken.
Oh, just the best.
Yeah. And then that basically led me to sort of where I am today. PS2, PS3. The first Nintendo home console I owned was actually a Nintendo Wii. But I had a Game Boy Advance SP. And a DS. But just tried to play anything and everything I could get my hands on, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense based on the career you've had. I feel like you are very good at sort of understanding and playing everything across all platforms. Like, I feel like I could see like your Donkey Kong Bonanza review, for example, the other week. Like, did not surprise me to see you play that. But then also I'll see you review, the Dead Rising remaster last year. Like, you seem to have always had that knowledge of, that widespread. And that makes sense based on the types of things you were playing growing up.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I don't get to review a lot of fighting games because the fighting game community scares me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah,
I'm the guy who sort of Mortal Kombat is always my fighting game, but other people, even in the industry, constantly tell me Mortal Kombat's the worst one, Aaron. What the hell are you doing? And I'm like, well, okay, I'll just be over here enjoying my fatalities. Don't worry.
Mortal Kombat's great. I'm also a Mortal Kombat enjoyer. So is Mortal Kombat the only fighting game you still play? You're not a Tekken guy anymore?
I mean, obviously, Switch 2 came out recently, so that was a good excuse to dip back into Street Fighter 6. But I'd say Mortal Kombat's always my main game, mainly because going back to my childhood again, I just have so many fond memories of watching those original 2 movies. Annihilation, which I never owned, but my cousin did, and I remember watching it, thinking it was so good because it had way more characters in it. I was like, oh my god, they've got Sub-Zero's brother and Cyrax is in it. Why am I watching this first film where it's not that hindsight's a wonderful thing, but also I don't know if you'll remember this, but there was once a Mortal Kombat spin-off, live action spin-off show called Mortal Kombat Conquest. This is real.
I do not remember this whatsoever.
Yeah, it's technically a prequel to those first 2 movies where it follows Kung Lao, and it's about him being Earthrealm's sort of defender and what goes on outside of the Mortal Kombat tournament, and he gets into like all kinds of scrapes and fights a load of people. And I just remember my mum recording that on VHS because I was already, it was my bedtime by the time the episodes came out.
Yeah.
And I remember this is such a tangent, so apologies in advance.
No, keep going.
My granddad introduced me to like Bruce Lee movies, right? And I told him like, I play Mortal Kombat. He wasn't, but whenever we'd go around my grandparents' house and we'd watch Bruce Lee movies, I'd be like, oh, which one's Liu Kang? And my mum would sort of like point at some random guy and go, look, that one's Liu Kang. Like, watch it. We're watching like Enter the Dragon. He's like, that's Shang Tsung. And I'm like, okay. So then when a TV show came out where these characters were like identifiable, like Smoke is there, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, this is awesome. And funny enough, full circle moment, when Mortal Kombat 1 was coming out, I was at Gamescom a couple years ago. Gamescom is about to happen when we're recording, by the way. That's why it's on my mind. I didn't have an appointment with Ed Boon, but I saw him just walking around and I shook his hand. I said, Ed, you don't know who I am, but we need a second season of Mortal Kombat Conquest. And then I said goodbye, and he probably was like, what the hell was that guy talking about right there? But I was deadly serious. I was like, we need Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Wow, what a deep pull.
Yeah.
Was there any recognition in his eyes when you said Mortal Kombat Conquest? Do you think he was just baffled?
He sort of like, he just like laughed like the nice man he is, really. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was just so happy to, because I don't know if you get this question a lot, Liam, but it's always like, who's your bucket list interview? Who would you like to meet in the games industry? And for me, while there's people I respect, I don't think there's that holy grail person. But it was only in that moment where I was kind of like, I guess because of everything I've just told you, I think Ed Boon sort of was that guy. Like, and I'm not a big fan of professionally, like when you're on the job asking people for like pictures or to sign stuff, because I always think there's that line, and maybe it's a bit old school, shows how long I've been doing this, but in that instance, the sort of childhood kid in me took over, and I was like, no, I don't know when I'm going to see this guy again. I got to shake his hand.
I mean, you weren't interviewing him. I think it's different. You sort of met him as a fan in that instance rather than as a professional, I would argue. It's kind of the one instance where you can be like, yeah, all right, let's have a quick chat about Conquest and a photo. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I didn't get a photo, unfortunately, but I don't think they're going to stop making Mortal Kombat games anytime soon, so we'll see if that happens.
Ed will be around for a while, won't he?
Come on, Ed.
Well, on the subject of games media, did you have a relationship with it when you were younger?
Yeah, funnily enough, I did. Even though it took me sort of a long time to sort of work out that I wanted to do this for a living. I always remember picking up official Nintendo magazine back in the day. I don't think I picked up Games Master, but I was always aware that like print media magazines. You know, you go into the shop and there's 110% gaming or whatever it was called. But Official Nintendo seemed to be the one, purely I think because that was the only one my parents were comfortable buying me.
Right.
Depending on what was on the cover of the others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And funnily enough, I remember getting an issue with some magnetic Mario Kart bookmarks, and I think it came with like 4 or 5 with different characters on either side, and I still have 2 of those to this day.
Really?
Yeah, which is quite cool. So they've come with me as I'm like reading books and stuff. I always make sure to like keep them.
Wow.
In terms of like the YouTube space, there was a couple of YouTubers I watched back in the day, most of which aren't around anymore. But yeah, in terms of, games media as a thing, I think I came to it really late in terms of like, wait, people do this for a job type thing. But I was definitely reading magazines and using, cheat code books when they were all the rage.
Mm-hmm.
Cheat code books.
I wonder what that issue of, was it Official Nintendo, or was it when it was Nintendo Official? 'Cause it was NOM for a while, wasn't it? And then it became O&M.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I could definitely track down those bookmarks and maybe sort of try and cross-reference it. That'd be quite cool, actually.
Yeah, send me a photo after and I'll put them on the episode post on the website so people can see what you're talking about.
There you go.
So say more about that transition then. So if you came a bit late to the idea that I can do this for a living, can you remember when you first realised that? And what's the story of how you began to write about games professionally?
Yeah, so I studied history at degree level, university in the UK, purely because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I enjoyed it. So I took my C in A-level history and I was like, God damn you, college of mine, I'm going to continue studying history.
Yep.
And as part of a third year module, there was a module called public history where multiple times a week, you just had to go do a history adjacent job. So a lot of people would go and work in a museum. Some people would work in a graveyard. I'm like, that doesn't seem like an ideal way to spend the day for me.
No.
So, but the lecturer there was like, I do have a contact at the Bristol Times, which is like a bi-weekly supplement for the local paper here, which is it's called the Bristol Post at the time, which in a weird way is owned by my current employer right now. So roundabout way. So for a year, I spent just 1 or 2 days a week writing articles about history, local interest stories for that. And then after I graduated, I got a job in marketing, writing about windows, doors, and conservatories for a couple of years. I was like, "You're going to pay me to write? Yeah, okay. I'll write about composite doors if you want me to. Amazing. I'll write about condensation, how they combat it." So did that, and then sort of alongside that job, started volunteering for some sites. A site which is still going today actually is gamespew.com, independent site run by 2 lovely people, Kim and Rich, and them and a few others. Switchplayer magazine run by a guy called Paul, who's still going. He does a lot of Nintendo focused fanzines and stuff. Just started writing for people as and when. I can remember the first code I got sent.
Oh, what was it?
It was, it's a really, in my opinion, it's like an unsung. It could have been in the book actually, but do you remember a game called Virginia, Liam?
Yeah, I do remember the wordless Twin Peaks style like sort of like walking simulator visual novel kind of thing, right?
Exactly, yes.
I do remember that, yeah.
So that was the first game code I ever got sent for PS5, and I remember sending an email while I was at my work desk. I was writing for a site called Film Games Etc. at the time. And I was like, "Hello, I'm Aaron from Film Games Etc. I'd really like to review your game." I can't remember if it was out by that point. And probably, depending on whether I'm looking at Facebook memories on the right day, there's like a very cringy Facebook status of me like, "I got my first review code. This feels like
a big moment though."
Yeah. And I got really lucky with that one because that's another game that, like, indies, there's such an influx of them these days. But back then, that kind of game did have its kind of like week or 2 weeks in the sun. It was
Absolutely.
like, walking simulators were a big thing. And, Virginia is still absolute banger. I much prefer it to the studio's follow-up title, Last Stop, unfortunately, which I think was a bit more, played more like a conventional Telltale title. I ended up reviewing that for PlayStation Magazine, I want to say. Can't remember what I gave it, but Virginia was good. So that's sort of how I got the ball rolling, and then eventually, started freelancing, reaching out to editors, showing them a body of work. Because obviously, for people that are trying to break into games journalism, there's always that thing of don't just write for exposure. If you're going to write, and build up a portfolio, you should write for yourself, which I think is more important than ever now. But back then, in order to just, play games that people wanted to read about, you had to kind of like be part of a community and write for an established site to get advanced access. And from there, I just, spent a year doing that until eventually other pastures came a-calling.
Can you remember where you were first commissioned to write for?
I believe it was for a little indie website called GamesRadar.com.
Oh, was it really? Oh, yeah. Very small. I don't think many people have heard of it.
Yeah, it's GamesRadar.com, and I believe the editor was a guy called Andy Hartup, who's not there anymore. I think he's still within the Future family, though. And it wasn't actually directly about games. It was about the Castlevania TV show that had just come out on Netflix. So this would have been around about 2017, I want to say. Then I did a couple more bits, and I think that was actually one of the ways I sort of like stood out. It's like, I'm not pitching to review the latest Call of Duty. I've got this interesting take on the Castlevania TV show. Can you, are you interested in it? And thankfully, that sort of one thing led to another. And GamesRadar obviously is a sister site to back then Kotaku UK. Kotaku UK, man. I'm just like dating myself all over the shop here. I wrote for Games Master, wrote for Kotaku UK, like all these things that have since been sunsetted. And that was like kind of crazy, like learning about commissioning and headline pitches and what the hell. Well, I knew what a CMS was because I was writing for Windows sites, window installers, but battling the back end CMS for future websites. So yeah. I'm rambling now.
No, you're not at all. Can you remember that? Because I always see you as a big, and I know it's because you probably worked for Wireframe, but I've always seen you as a big magazine guy. Like, I know how much you've always loved writing for print. And like you say, you wrote for some Nintendo fanzines and things like that. Do you remember the first time you were published in print? Yeah,
it was probably either Official PlayStation Magazine, which was edited by a guy called Matthew Pellett, who's still very much in the industry now. He's really nice guy. I believe he heads up publishing at a publisher called Secret Mode, previously part of Sumo Digital. And I actually remember I told him this once, years before he actually ended up commissioning me. I did send him like a letter, a handwritten letter, asking for work experience on Official PlayStation Magazine.
Wow.
And he got back to me. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to like offer me it for whatever reason. But that was very kind of him. So when he started commissioning me, that was cool. From there, it was kind of like, as I said, like Games Master, wrote a couple of articles for them. I knew the prestige of Games Master. That was crazy. And then I also wrote for the magazine incarnation of PC Gamer only once. I believe I've only ever written for PC Gamer once, and that was because my commissioning editor, Philippa War, left soon after. And you know what it's like. Once you lose like that contact, it's kind of like impossible to get it back in some cases.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been lucky enough to write for a bunch of magazines, and you know what it's like. You just kind of like put yourself out there. You're like, anybody who will take me. It sounds kind of crazy, but when you're in your early 20s and you've got that fire within you to sort of like finish a 9 to 5, then do your hour commute back to your home, then play a game, then to write, thoughtfully and critically about that game. And the fact that you're going to pay me to do that, helps. So it's crazy how, when I think back now to how like quote unquote hard I used to work to sort of make it all work, and the hustle that was involved. And this was back then when obviously games media was in a much healthier position than it is right now. Hence why we were talking about this off the pod, but when people ask you for advice about how to break into games journalism these days, it's tough. Because I remember hearing the people back then say, don't get into games journalism. It's tough. And by golly, is it tough. And this year and the most recent years have proved that. But so luckily, I always think of it, and I don't know how you feel about this, Liam, but there was the golden age, quote unquote, of magazine journalism, right? Before the .com sort of boom happened, early to mid 90s, and then websites start to happen. There are writers that I looked up to that wrote for those magazines, that made a name for themselves in those magazines. And then I always think about people like me and you coming up in the generation after, where we're caught in the in-between, where those magazines are still around, but we're also not really interested per se in the sort of YouTube video, TikTok, social mediaification of games journalism, because the written word should ultimately mean something. And not to get too high and mighty, but I think that's becoming less and less the case as time goes on. There's still, a few examples of websites that are, and YouTube channels really, that are still doing good games criticism. But so at times I often have to catch myself, because I'm like, oh, if only I was born like 10 years earlier, I reckon I would have rocked it on the games magazine scene. And I know you would have too, Liam. But at the same time, it's like, hey, the indie game scene isn't what it was back then as it is now. And, it's very, it feels like the chapter of my quote unquote career is, closing as the book comes out or is coming out, because now I don't have a tie to print media, but also indie games in the exact same way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I do.
It's interesting.
It is interesting. I think when you hear a lot of people, I mean, both of us listen to a lot of the Back Page, the podcast by
Never
Matthew
heard of
Castle
them.
and Sam Robert. And, they speak a lot about like the era that we're talking about, sort of the age, the era when OPM was selling whatever it was, like 1 million copies an issue or something ludicrous.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like a lot of people, when they try and get in games media, they're trying to get into a version of it that they've idealized from like 10 years before. And I feel like when I walked into games media and I looked around and realized it was just a burning building, and I was like, oh yeah, I really got in this too late, and I think you obviously were in there 6-7 years before me. And that's helped because you got all of those, contacts for magazines and stuff. But like you say, these things are disappearing and it's hard. I once sent an email to Simon Miller when he was at Video Gamer.
Amazing.
Simon Miller, the wrestler now, I guess.
Simon Miller, the bold a-hole.
Yeah.
As he calls himself. That's not
your
just
words.
me.
I don't want to get on Simon's, but he could suplex me into oblivion, Aaron.
Yeah.
I remember emailing him and saying, I've been doing like some YouTube stuff, been doing some writing. I'd love some advice of how to get into games media. And the email he sent back to me just said, don't.
Really?
And this was 2015. This was way
Wow.
before I even thought about it. But
all the signs were there, Liam. What are we thinking?
Yeah, why did I think 7 years later after a pandemic, I'm like, yeah, maybe I should try this out full time. So were there, other than Virginia, were there any other games that really defined those early years of your career?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the beautiful thing about magazines and freelancing for them, like, it was the page space you were given just to write about, to run with your thoughts. I remember I was working so not to give you the whole story of my life, but I guess my first stepping stone to full-time games criticism was for a site called Console Deals, which you may know because it was the site I worked at before Push Square. And Console Deals were really good to me in that they still let me freelance. And I remember going into the shop on my lunch break one day and seeing the latest copy of Retro Gamer. It's my first ever cover story, which was about Star Wars games. And the pitch I gave to Darren, who's still the editor of Retro Gamer these days, really good magazine, long may it reign, was, an alternate galaxy. Before Disney came in and wiped everything, wiped the board of lore, to put it poorly, there were all these games that were responsible for fleshing out the Star Wars era in video game form. And he sort of bought into that. And he commissioned me. I told him some of the interviewees I'd already lined up. And he never outright stated that it was going to be on the cover, but when he told me it was going to be like a 12-page spread, and he was sourcing some interviews as well. He's like, I think we're missing some input about the Old Republic here, Knights of the Old Republic. So I'm going to put you in touch with this guy. So that was a big moment. And again, I have a picture somewhere of me like picking that up from a W.H. Smith's. And funnily enough, just a few magazines over, you can see a cheeky Wireframe magazine, which I think I also had something in. But yeah, it's all about the hustling, man. And I remember interviewing Joe Mad for Darksiders Genesis for Official Xbox magazine. I've got my girlfriend hates it. I've got every magazine I've ever written in like behind me, and
it's great.
Edge since I've started reading it. I know you're an Edge man as well.
Yeah. Takes up so much space in my office. It's
I
getting
know.
ridiculous now.
I'm having these thoughts now. I'm kind of like, what am I going to do with this Edge collection? Really? Like, should I keep the like nice covers and obviously the ones that I'm in, the one that I'm in? But speaking of which, I remember we were both at Push Square, and Push Square again, very fortunate because I was working on the video side. They let me freelance editorially elsewhere. And I remember having that back and forth with you, about I've written for Edge magazine, man. And the issue is coming out soon.
Yep.
And you being so happy for me and, me just like in disbelief. That was like a big okay, maybe I am kind of good at this type thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's only happened once. I could name you so many outlets that I've only written for once, because getting that pitch and story through was like such a Herculean effort, but obviously it was all worthwhile. Trying to breaking anywhere is tough. And but then again, I was always trying to do this alongside full-time work, and that ended up paying off, I guess, when Ryan from Wireframe kindly poached me to be features head there. So yeah, there's definitely that tie to print, because I sound like an old soul, but it's nice to have something in your hands, right?
It is.
And that's why not to keep bringing it back to the book. I'm never going to talk about it, but it's cool that people are something I made is going to be in people's hands like that. I'll never get over that.
Yeah. That is the joy of print media. I completely agree. I've only been published like once or twice in magazines, but it's so different to when stuff's put online and, you've put more heart and soul into it. Someone's laid it out on a page. It is a beautiful thing.
That's the thing. Sorry to interrupt, but
No.
I'm sure you'll agree with how cool it is, especially when you're freelancing. You submit a feature or review, I guess a feature, to an editor of a print magazine. And then the surprise as the person who wrote it, seeing it laid out and what the art editor has done in terms of presentation, seeing all those box outs come together, it's like, whoa, I look pretty good and this looks good. Do you know what I mean?
It elevates your work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes it look so much more pro. You joined Push Square in September 2021, which is when we first met. And I was instantly a fan of you as a person. You just bring an effortless enthusiasm with you wherever you go. And it was just contagious.
Oh, mate.
We only worked together for maybe 2 or 3 months, but that period was one of the highlights of my times in games. Should we talk very briefly about Push Square and our time there together?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
It was brief, but it was beautiful. We did so many videos, like I say, about PlayStation 5 update patch notes.
Yeah, I didn't dip too much into the update, like the firmware side of stuff, but I'm guessing those videos did really well.
Yeah, they did. They did weirdly well. people were desperate to know what font and UI changes Sony had made to the PS5.
Oh, no one else is covering this stuff. We need to let people know. So
yeah.
But yeah, it was good because obviously I saw the role go live and I saw that you were already hosting and running the channel, and I was a big fan of yours as well. You've got a sense of comedy, timing, and sort of a cadence to the way you talk about stuff that is just for the lack of a better word, a bit intoxicating. Oh, I want to see what this Geordie guy's about. Why is he referencing this oddball game so much? But yeah, I remember coming in, starting full time, and feeling a bit why am I here? Because you were there. Admittedly in a freelance capacity, but also putting the pressure on myself to sort of step up to your level because you had done such a good job with the channel. So that was how I was coming into Push Square. That's
interesting. So I was intimidated by you when you joined, because I was he is a guy who knows what he's doing. You were doing I remember when you first started, maybe 3 videos a week you were doing that were really editorial focused.
Yeah.
This is I remember one being about Star Wars games, this new renaissance of it. And, you did great videos like that. The PSP video that you did, and was 2011 the best year for Sony games?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Meanwhile, I was just well, here's a bit of news about a Metal Gear maybe. Or but I feel what was nice was after a few weeks, we just sort of just realized okay, we are so in tune with each other in terms of our interests, and just bouncing ideas off each other and doing things together. It was just a great laugh while it lasted.
Yeah, it's a shame that it couldn't have lasted longer, obviously. But you obviously had to go off and take. Some guy sent you a job application link, and one thing led to another. But it's interesting because I love, those are the types of videos I love, where it's just one guy exploring a topic, and I don't think it's sort of a revelation to say that those videos didn't necessarily perform the best, but especially as someone, I guess you might not have had this opportunity because you were technically freelance for Push Square and paid per video. I don't know. But as long as I could make it work in my schedule, I could make those types of videos, try and build up a relationship with the community. And there'd be times where the thing is with that job, and obviously there's a great guy that does it now. I regenerated into another Aaron Bain.
You did. And he's doing a great job.
A Scotsman. He's doing a great job. He's actually done a really good job of making Push Square his own, to the point that he's changed the thumbnail design. It's far slicker than any of the videos I ever edited.
Same.
Well, I don't know about that, but because all my graphics and stuff, that was just lifted from you. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff on the video side. The editorials, they were really fun to do. That was it. The thing is with that job is I would wake up. I say to myself, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's when the video needs to come out, And so you'd think you got, okay, Tuesday, Thursday to sort of like work on ideas and stuff. The amount of times I would just wake up in the morning, not know what I was working on that day. But somehow, by some miracle, at roughly 5 p.m., a video would publish on Push Square. And sometimes it would even be half decent. So that was kind of like the nature of that job. But I know you've worked on the video side and specifically YouTube side of stuff, and that's kind of where I find myself at with my current job a fair bit now. But it was just while the job itself was fun, I always find it tough just trying to detach myself from the numbers on the back end and the constant checking and the performance and it consumed me, to be honest. I'd be at the cinema with friends about to go watch film or whatever, and I'm checking my phone to see how the latest video that day has done. And if it didn't do as good as the last one, it's kind of like, oh, what did I do wrong type thing. Yeah. Especially because Nintendo Life, obviously the OG channel for the Hookshot Media Network, as it is now known, it's just constantly kicking ass. There's 3 great hosts there. You had John, who's now at GVG.
Good Vibes Gaming.
Yes. Who me and you are lucky enough to know, a bunch of those guys. So it was absolutely a great job, and I do not regret it for an instant. But there are definitely the pressure I was putting on myself to do a good job when things are outside of my control. I don't think it was healthy. For me personally, I don't know how you felt about that side of.
It drove me insane.
Yeah,
it destroyed me as a person. Yeah, I remember being abroad with Yoli, my partner, and we were on a beach, and I was checking my phone to see how the latest like RPS video had performed.
Oh wow!
And spoilers, not well. So and it's you're right. It's not in your control, and video, I think, as a medium is, especially for sort of like this traditional editorial side that we have backgrounds in, it's getting harder and harder to sort of find the right audience for that kind of stuff. But yeah, when you got the call from Wireframe and, they said, hey, want you to come on and be a features ed, how was that? How was that moment, and how was it to start working there?
Yeah, it's funny because I think you were one of the first people
me.
I told that had happened. Yeah. The thing with Wireframe, and I'd say this now, like it's the best job I ever had and ever will have. Like the truth is that at Push Square, I was there roughly 6 months. I told them obviously that Wireframe wanted me, and they were a bit in disbelief because it had obviously only been 6 months, and I really felt for them. But they understood that this is what I wanted to do, and that I wasn't leaving because I hated the job, despite everything I just said. I would have stayed there.
Well, it wasn't about them, was it? It was more about I know what you meant.
Yeah. There's so many people there that are still there, and they do a cracking job, and I wish them all the luck in the world. And like I said, Aaron's kicking ass. Sammy's like one of the nicest editors around. But when Ryan came calling with like, hey, would you be interested with this job at Wireframe magazine? He'd previously offered me it before the magazine had launched, or not offered me the job, but asked me to apply, and I did, and I didn't get it. But obviously he still kept me on as like a freelancer and stuff. So I was always like in the weeds there. So it really meant a lot to me that was the first time I'd been like headhunted in my life, or quote unquote poached. And the fact that it was for a magazine that I respected so much, that wrote about indie games and, the games that I thought mattered. And, the thing is with Wireframe is that it was funded by Raspberry Pi. It was essentially, it never made money. It was a rich man's folly. But I was like, hey, I'll be a rich man's folly if it means I get to write about the games.
The dream.
Yeah, for print. It's funny because Backpage Pod, I feel like they're always saying like, if there's a millionaire out there, we'll just do all the content. And, that this is as close to that as I came. Yeah. So I was only there a year, and it was the best year ever. Specifically the first 7 or 8 months before they told us that, hey, the magazine might be shutting. But we fought tooth and nail to the end. And obviously the thing is with that magazine is it was given away for free as a PDF every month. Yeah. So everyone could read your work. Obviously in terms of like generating income side of things, it was a little bit less feasible. But I really liked working with Ryan. That was my first experience of like commissioning people, freelancers, and working with art editors. My the funniest thing I always remember about like my first day or two at Wireframe magazine is that the flat planning and the art design of the mag was outsourced to a secondary company. Me and Ryan were just the only two quote unquote full-time staff on the magazine. And the way we communicated with them was via Skype, which in a post-pandemic world, 2022,
that's wild.
I said to Ryan was like slacking me. He was like, yeah, here's the Slack link. Here's the Skype link for, talking to these guys. And I'm like, okay, yeah. All right. How do we actually talk to them? And he was like, no, it's Skype. And I'm like, oh, okay, no worries. So maybe that was a little bit of a canary in the coal mine. I'm joking. But no, I have most issues of Wireframe, don't have all of them, but that was a really fun time. And it's interesting because it's the job I'm most proud of and the one I found the most fulfilled at. But it's the one that people know about the least. Like I have to explain to them. Sort of like,
really?
Yeah, they're like, oh, who are you? And I'm like, I'm Aaron. I used to write for a magazine called Wireframe, and now I do this type thing. And they're like, oh, Wireframe. Do you mean Wired? And I'm like, no, don't mean Wired. That always comes up. But
interesting.
It is funny seeing like what spawned out of Wireframe. Like, there's this great indie-centric magazine now called Debug, which is very indie-centric, and they do good work. And numerous times they've cited Wireframe as an influence. I worked with them a little bit here and there back during the first 2 issues, so that was really cool. So yeah, print magazine, writing about indie games is not something, and getting paid to do it. A very nice salary, I will say, Liam. It was very nice.
Well, rich man's folly. So
there you go. There you go. I think I'm still under NDA as to what I can say in terms of like my redundancy with that job, but yeah, it was a good time.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that after we finish recording.
Oh, it's not that spicy.
Well, that's disappointing. You are right, though, earlier, that magazine had such a great indie sensibility, and some of the games you were putting on the cover of that magazine were indie games that would never have got a look in, especially the era in which you were publishing magazines from even something like Edge. How was it to source those games and to put them on the cover?
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like I never get to talk about this stuff. Like, selecting indie games, like just professionally or with other people. Like I never really talk about my time at Wireframe a lot, so this is quite refreshing. But so I remember my first experience. The first issue I was on, we were already halfway through the month, so the cover was locked, and it was for a game which I won't name, but they sent through like a sketch of like the game's key art, and Ryan looked at it and was like, okay, yeah, let's go back to them and get tell them to like do a full color way of that. They came back saying, no, that's what we want the cover to be. And Ryan went, oh, no. We can't put a sketch on. Like, it was literally like hand drawn. It was beautiful, but it's not something you can put on a cover, right? It's not high enough res. It's, it's not shelf ready. So we ended up going for another game called Fix Fox, which is a really sweet little game.
Yeah.
Where about a fox who you're using different tools to like survive on a planet. It's really, really cool. That wasn't originally intended to be the cover, but it became the cover. So that's just an example of how one game came about. It was very, because there are times where I've worked on magazines prior to Wireframe. I previously worked at Future on a design mag called Creative Arts and a magazine called Mac Life, Tech Mag. I wanted to use that as a stepping stone to write within the sort of games family of Future. Didn't end up happening, but from that I knew how stressful working on magazines were.
Yeah,
and Wireframe by comparison was a lot smoother, thankfully. But that's just an example of where things go wrong. You have to think on your feet. Suddenly, the whole flat plan needs to change. But it was a lot of fun, and I think it was only like 1 or 2 issues in where Ryan. His daughter, I think, had a serious medical issue, unfortunately. She's fine now. But he sort of had to step away for a month. And the managing editor of kind of like the family of magazines sort of like turned to me and was like, hey, we know you just started, but do you think you'll be all right to like do this stuff? And I'm sort of going, I guess, I'll do it. Most of the stuff had been commissioned, but what I remember from that issue was I pitched a 6-page feature, which was an average feature length for a feature in Wireframe, about celebrating the sort of, I can't remember, it would have been the 5-year anniversary of the original Nintendo Switch. And I wanted to write a feature about the games that were there on the eShop day one on the Nintendo Switch, because I feel like,
nice.
Yeah, that's people got their Switch and they're like, what do I do now? I play Breath of the Wild, but then what? Yeah. So I kind of spoke to the guys between Cut It Out, Snipper Clips?
Snipper Clips.
Yes, Snipper Clips is what it's called. And as well as the guys between behind Fast RMX. I think Fast Fusion, was that the latest one? But
Fast Fusion was the Switch 2 one they've just done, isn't it? Yeah, Fast
Yeah.
RMX was the Switch launch one.
There you go, Fast RMX. And there was one other, but essentially I spoke to 3 different developers to put together that feature, and one of the developers just was not getting back to me. I'd sent over my questions, deadline was looming. Thankfully, they got it back in time. We got it designed and we made the issue, but that's an example of like things coming together last minute.
Yeah.
Really exciting though. And then the final anecdote I'll say is you are right in terms of like games having opportunities to get on a cover that otherwise wouldn't. The 2 examples I always think about is Cassette Beasts, which is Jay Bayless's game, which is like this really super cool modern take on Pokemon, made in Godot engine. So it's like that sort of 2D HT style, but indie centric, of course, about recording creatures and meshing them together within a game about fighting landlords and stuff, all that fun stuff. It's very millennial coded, and that's why I think I like it so much.
Yeah.
So that was on the magazine because he reached out to me and I sort of like interviewed him during Brighton Develop one year in a bar of all places. He let me play the demo on his laptop. Really cool story. Classic. Yeah. And then Deliver Us Mars was another one where Sam Roberts, Esquire from Backpage Pod sort of... this was before anything out there was announced. He was like, hey, Aaron, I know you reviewed Deliver Us the Moon for Wireframe. This was before I started working there full time. And I'd even forgot that I reviewed Deliver Us the Moon for Wireframe.
Oh, really?
Until he told me. And I'm like, oh, shit, I hope I gave it a good score. Can we curse on this podcast? I just said the
yes,
S word.
we can. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Effing no. So and he played me the trailer for that game, and Ryan was in the call, and they were like, hey, what do you think about that? We'll get some custom art made. And then I took the bus to Bath one day. We set up in a cafe. He let me play an early demo build. This was when he was still working at Frontier, and we got the exclusive for Deliver Us Mars. And ever since then I've had a really good relationship with that developer, Kyokan Interactive, who unfortunately have fallen on really hard times in recent years, as a lot of indie developers have, and but they're still making their latest game work, Deliver Us Home. So hopefully, but it was just super fun, man. Like to see how excited indie developers would be. I remember we had a game, sort of this limbo like called Silt on the cover with a really nice sort of like foiled finish.
It was a beautiful cover, that one.
Yeah, do you remember that?
Really vividly. Yeah.
But I remember handing that. This was before the issue had come on sale to the developers at my beloved EGX Rezzed back in the day.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. And they, their eyes would like sparkle. So I've got loads of stories. Might have only been there a year, but yeah, best time.
Yeah. Oh, they were great anecdotes. I mean, I had a question here of like, what were your favorite memories? And I feel like you've hit on a few there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it was just great to see you go there. You were just perfect for the job. And I was heartbroken when that magazine went under.
Oh, man. So obviously I'd only been there a year, and like I said, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah.
And luckily the mirror sort of fell into my lap. But I just remember Ryan messaging me and he was like, oh, I'm so sorry, dude. Like I took you from Push Square and a year later this magazine's like, done for. And I'm like, do not worry about it.
Yeah.
These things happen. I've never been laid off before. And really, have you been working in the games industry until you've been laid off?
True.
I don't think
Rite
so.
of passage, I think, for some people would argue.
Yeah. The thing is, it seemed too good to be true while I was working on it. I was like, all those things I talked about earlier, like, indie game centric, giving the magazine away for free. When I was on it, I was just kind of like, how are we doing this? And lo and behold, what happened, but wouldn't change it for the world. And some of my best work, honestly, I think.
Oh yeah, you were smashing it. Like every issue, you were bringing your A game. It was a really wonderful mag, and one that always has a real special place in my heart because the first magazine I ever got published in print.
Yeah, was that your interview with Jay Tholen? Perhaps?
It was. Of course, it was about Hypnospace Outlaw. I'm a man with 2 interests, and that's one of them.
Honestly, that may be a big part why it made it into the book. I'll be honest.
No way.
It's your love
Really?
and passion for it. I was like, I remember Liam, like that indie game. Let's see what that's about. And then Jay Tholen obviously is quite the character. And I was like, this is an indie game that has to be in there because it's so different to anything else out there. So yeah.
100%. Well, that's a great segue, I think, to take us into talking about the book. So, Aaron, the reason why you're here is because you've got a book coming out. It's out on the 20th of August, 50 Indie Games That Changed the World. It's published by Bitmap Books, and it's a gorgeous looking thing, which is to be expected from, something published by Bitmap. Can you just give us a very brief summary of what the book is for those who might not have heard of this yet?
Yeah. So the great thing about calling your book 50 Indie Games That Changed the World is it's right there in the title, really.
It's quite self-explanatory.
I've done the hard work for most people. We even put the, characters representing each indie game on the cover of the book, so which was quite nice to see. But no, it's essentially a book celebrating 50 of the most quote-unquote influential, impactful indie games to have come out since this current era of digital download-only games that we're currently in.
Yeah.
With the onset of the Steam storefront and other console storefronts such as, Xbox Live and the PlayStation Store, Nintendo eShop. This is a bit of a tangent, but, it was mentioned to me pretty early on. It's like, well, indie means, certain things. And I think, yeah, but this is what indie means today. Yes. And I think if you put that on the cover of a book, that's what people would expect to find. So my original pitch to Bitmap was 50 chapters, 50 interviews, 50 indie games that changed the world. And luckily enough, they went for it and they were really excited by it. And that's sort of where we're at now. It's there is an honorable mention section towards the back of the book where games that are equally as worthy get a shout out. But I think I can tell you what the book is, like I just did, but equally as important is what the book isn't, which is a book of the top 50 indie games of all time.
Yeah.
That's not what this is.
Interesting.
So, people might disagree. In fact, many have already.
Really?
Oh yeah. It's like, this is very unusual for me to be like, quote unquote, shilling a product or, talking about something I've made, right? Because I'm usually on the other side of this equation. And it has given me a lot of respect and empathy for interviewees trying to like talk about their games, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Especially if it ends up in print where that's it. You're immortalized forever, your quotes. But yeah, it's been quite interesting seeing everybody like, where's X game? Why is this here and not X? And it's kind of like, well, read the chapter, then tell me. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but every chapter of the book features a little paragraph at the end titled How It Changed the World. And that's sort of me trying to anticipate people's criticism about why is this here, despite them having already read the chapter, where I sort of make a case about why this book is here, not in lieu of something else that could also be here, just how it changed the world in its own small way. So yeah, that's what the book is.
So I'm really surprised to hear that people have, it's the internet, people are terrible, but when I saw the full list of games when the pre-orders for the book went live, I thought, yep, that feels like, especially when you say that this is what indie means today, I completely agree. I always sort of see of like World of Goo is like the start of sort of the modern interpretation of indie. So to like name a few of the games that you've got in here, you've got 80 Days, Broken Age, Celeste, Disco Elysium, Don't Starve, Fez, Hades, Hotline Miami, Hypnospace Outlaw, Night in the Woods, Limbo, Return of the Obra Dinn, Undertale, Vampire Survivors, Stardew Valley, and Indieventure favourite Braid. What was the process like for selecting these games, and what was the thought process you went through of the games that you deemed to be the 50 that changed the world?
Yeah, so I set myself a rule early on, which was one developer, one game.
Nice.
Which technically, I set myself a lot of rules, and I broke a lot of those rules, Liam, I will say. There's more than 50 games in this book. There's more than 50 interviews. And there's at least one case of technically the same developer. I don't know, Ed McMillen's here talking about Super Meat Boy and also The Binding of Isaac, obviously. There's an interesting anecdote about that, which I might get into later on. But the process was essentially, it started with me writing just a big list of indie games off the top of my head about what I think are the most influential. What are the ones that I always see talked about? What are the ones that people constantly reference? And what are the ones that sort of you can pick an indie game releasing today and draw a clear line all the way back to?
Nice.
So that was sort of where I started. From there, I did look at a lot of like websites and magazines, like here are the top games, the top 100 indie games of all time or whatever. I think IGN has a list there. But my hope for the game was for the book was to obviously showcase an eclectic mix of games of all different genres, whilst also hinting at some of the most popular genres that the indie scene is currently known for now. So you're going to see a lot of Metroidvanias. You're going to see a lot of roguelikes in here, mainly because those are the two genres that in recent years have come to define what the indie scene is. But also those games also provide their own spin on that, potentially kickstarting like a whole other trend that we're currently in the midst of, right? So it was kind of, once I'd done that, once I wrote my list of indie games, it was a simple case of like reaching out to anyone and everyone, however I could. And really, you know, as I said before, it's not the best indie games of all time, but my hope is that if I speak to the average person, if I said indie games, what would be the first thing that came to your head? Name me your top 3 indie games. My hope would be that most, if not all of those, are featured in this book here. And that's sort of like the process I used. It wasn't really influenced by what game got a 10 out of 10, what game got a 9 out of 10. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because as me and you very well know, Liam, 7 out of 10s, they're great games as well.
That's the gold spot. Yeah,
that is the gold spot.
The golden number.
So from there, it was kind of like about whittling down, like, okay, which game influenced what? Why does this belong here over certain others? And it was a really interesting process. Like 50 is a big number, and I fully recognize that not every aspect of the indie game scene is represented in this book. I've tried my best to, but it was also important for me to make sure that every chapter had an interview. And unfortunately, for one reason or another, there's games in the book which that wasn't possible for, hence why they're given an honorable mention. But, you know, the door is now open for potential another 50 indie games that changed.
50 more.
50 more. Who knows? If there's an appetite for it, I'd love to do it. But that's kind of where I started.
What was it like to interview that many people? Like, how do you prepare for such an endeavor?
Well, first of all, Liam, you actually have to play the game and know what you're talking about to some degree.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that part. That's a really good point, though.
Because as you hinted at, you know, it's both a privilege and a curse, I guess, is that I'm what you'd call a variety gamer. I don't really want to be, I only play this, I only play that. There are certain genres and series I, you know, hold a favor towards. But this was a case of me actually, in a lot of cases, going outside my comfort zone and playing games I wouldn't usually play because these games are held in such high regard. And a good example of that is Return of the Obra Dinn, which is what I would call like your notepad game. It's not just about sitting down and pushing buttons. You've also got to use your brain, make notes, sit there and work things out. And I'll be honest with you, Liam, I wasn't always having the best time whilst playing Return of the Obra Dinn. Knowing you, I'm not surprised by that. But having said that, I still recognised its genius and what it was doing, and obviously played a decent way into it. That I, you know, when the interview with Lucas Pope came about, which was one of the last interviews I conducted, actually.
Interesting.
Really interesting guy. Definitely knows his stuff, way more intelligent than I am. And there's me asking him about, like, so how did you come up with that one bit art style then? That's good. Asking him questions like that. But it's just so interesting. Like every interview, I would always ask the same question at the end is, you know, how do you think your game, if at all, influenced? How did it change the world? And a lot of people would say, "Oh,
interesting.
I can't possibly talk about my game in that sort of sense. That's too prestigious." And you know, because it's really hard to self-critique, right?
Yeah.
But luckily enough, you know, the benefit of being able to talk about 50 is that for the majority of these games, enough time has passed where we can sort of analyze the legacy and influence that their game had. And obviously with games media right now, it is the game comes out, we cover it with a review, maybe we had a preview and an interview feature, and then it's gone and forgotten about until the awards season rolls around. And there was an opportunity with this book where, most of the chapters do document the making of, but there's almost always a portion at the end where it's kind of like, here's the developer reflecting on the impact that their game had. So that was a really good thing to do. It was a combination of video interviews and text interviews, unfortunately. So what am I looking at here? So Spelunky, it was obviously a game that had to go in there. And Derek Yu was someone that I'd interviewed via email. But interestingly, it was a couple of years later during Summer Games Fest that he was there demoing UFO 50. I think it was last year. And I was sort of able to show him like a mock-up of the cover and say, hey, I really appreciate you contributing. Here's where the book is at. And he was kind of looking at me like, he was like, who is this guy again? Like, what? have we met before type thing. And I was kind of like, I know it doesn't seem like much, but it's a big deal to me that you're in it. So thanks a lot. I was, just walking. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants with this book, essentially. Like everybody in this book is vastly more talented than I am, or at least that's how I see it. But everyone was really, really nice and willing to take part and believed in the vision, and didn't require too much convincing. Thankfully, when you're being backed by a publisher as well known as Bitmap, people sort of recognize sort of what that is, and they can Bitmap has enough reach where it's like, oh, okay, my game's gonna appear in the next Bitmap book or alongside X game, and that's really cool. So in terms of the interviews themselves, I'm going all over the place here, but it was just a case of tackling each one on an individual basis, really, just having a list of questions ready and being prepared for where it might take you.
We were talking a bit about this before we started recording, but I feel like you've gotten access to quite a lot of developers that you often don't see interviewed that often. I know we're actually saying, I've written down here Toby Fox. He was well known for only ever doing a handful of interviews over the years. You let me know before this that actually he did a bunch last year for Deltarune, but you still managed to get have a conversation with him. How did those interviews come about? Was there anything in particular that opened those doors? Do you think it was having Bitmap as the publisher?
I don't really know. The Toby Fox situation is an interesting one. There's a handful of developers where, you try the usual stuff. You reach out to their email address. You hope you hear back, and sometimes you don't. So you try and find other avenues, whether that be through the PR company that represents them or some other means. So Toby Fox was interesting because it came about, and he actually gets a special thanks in the book through our mutual friend Xeon from Nintendo Life, because obviously he did a documentary a couple of years back about Earthbound and its impact, which I wasn't invited to be a talking head on, unfortunately. But we'll put that aside. I've not really played Earthbound. So.
Big mother guy, are we?
I'm not, and Xeon clearly knew that. But I met up with Xeon after I'd already left Push Square, a year or two before, and he very kindly bought an issue of Wireframe and was like, "This is really cool." And I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I was like, he was telling me what he was doing with the doc, and I was like, God, you need to show this somewhere. You need to show it at an event or something. And I think from that, he eventually got to show it at a PAX East or a PAX West. So I
was there for that.
There you go.
Yeah, got to see it live. Yeah.
And he's always been really thank you for that. And I'm like, dude, it was just I was having a coffee and the thought popped into my head, whatever. But I'd always knew that Xeon was like that, and he made impossible things come true. And he had Toby Fox appear in that documentary. So I sort of talked to him, and I was like, hey, how do we think we can make this happen? And through that, we went through a contact at Fangamer, of all places, who is sort of in charge of Undertale merch. And I didn't speak to him on a call, but I sent him my questions. And as you can imagine, getting responses back from Toby Fox, they're not the easiest to work with, depending on how he's feeling that day. So some of that, let me say, eccentricity made it into his chapter of the book, because it has to. It made my job a bit tougher, because I'm still trying to tell the story of the making of the game and its influence. Thankfully, there's a lot out there about Undertale as well, but obviously we got to have that original input, and Toby made that possible. So that was, jumped through several hoops, and thankfully he got back to me one day. This was before, I should also point out, so I spent a year just sourcing the interviews, and then 4 months writing the book before submitting it. So that 4 month period, one of the most stressful of my life, by the way.
God, 4 months.
Yeah,
Aaron.
But it's easy when you consider that this is essentially 50 feature articles. And I know how to write feature articles, especially when you have an interviewee to work off of and feed in. It's what I've been doing at Wireframe. So that's how I sort of viewed it in my head. But yeah, that initial year, it was kind of sourcing as many people as I can. And Toby got to me. This was before Twitter absolutely shat the bed and Elon Musk, made his purchase and everything. So contacting people through Twitter DM was a viable thing. So I can't imagine trying to source everything I did now with Twitter not being that useful work tool. LinkedIn Premium, I had a little bit, but there was a limit on that. So yeah, he was one of the most difficult to get, but we got him in there. Ed McMillen was a bit tricky, because obviously he's a very busy man. He's working on his new upcoming game at the moment. But it was interesting because I'd spoken to Tommy Refenes for Super Meat Boy, because I knew I wanted to have both Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac. And I was like, well, if I'm going to have Ed McMillen for one, it has to be The Binding of Isaac, right?
Yeah.
So I'd already done the interview for Super Meat Boy. It was really cool and everything. Tommy was like, it's been a long time since I do interviews about this stuff. So already in the back of my head, I'm like, oh yeah, let's make this happen, baby. And he was really nice. And then Ed McMillen, we were wrapping up our interview about The Binding of Isaac. It was really cool. And he just sort of offhandedly said like, hey, is anything happening with this book, in terms of like Super Meat Boy? And I was like, yeah, I've actually already interviewed Tommy for that chapter. And obviously their relationship, I don't know how documented it is, but it's kind of like,
I think they're not on speaking terms, is my understanding.
Yeah.
They just,
I don't know if that's still the case now, but I will say both men spoke very highly of each other, like during the interviews. Obviously, they're on the record; they're probably going to, but it's nice to hear. And it was at the end of the Binding of Isaac interview where he was like, "Oh, no, like you're going to interview me for Super Meat Boy, okay? Like we're going to arrange another call, and we're going to talk about Super Meat Boy because Super Meat Boy is me." Like those were his words to me.
Wow.
And I was like,
wow.
Okay. Like in terms of like that character is him, like representing the game. Not like I'm the one responsible.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah. But like,
yeah,
I wouldn't have thought, I don't know. I sort of would have assumed he didn't feel as passionately about it as his other projects, but that's incredible.
Yeah. So through that, they both feature in the Super Meat Boy chapter, and thank God they obviously do, because it's much better for it. I'm not too sure when the last time both of them were on the record in the same sort of article, so that's really cool. And then can I tell you one last tricky interviewee?
Yes, I was going to ask if you had any others, so please do.
No worries. So Hotline Miami, that was like crazy hard because those guys are obviously geniuses, and there was a bit of backlash against Hotline Miami too, and they were both like sharing the same phone while I was interviewing them, and the audio was not the best. So I was kind of like, oh my God, I'm panicking so much right now. I hope I'm recording, because that's the other thing with this stuff is like, I hope I'm recording right now.
Yeah.
The trickiest interview was Limbo by a country mile, I'll say. Because Limbo, obviously, like an important game that you have to have in there.
100%.
Could have included it as an honorable mention. I would have been personally gutted. It is what it is. What can you do? I emailed so many people to try and get somebody on the record to talk about that game. And the people have like spun off. I think there's at least 2 studios where somebody who had worked on Limbo has spun up their own studio, made something else, whether that be Cocoon, and there was that other game that was.
I'm trying to think of the name. I know what you mean.
Oh, it was like. I want to say like Sunderland or something. Somerville.
Sunderland.
Sunderland.
That's a horror game. Take it from me.
Yeah. There you go. First-hand experience. So, and I think it was the Cocoon people. Like, was it Dino? I can't remember now. But basically, his PR or his internal PR was like, "Yeah, this sounds good. We'd love to, contribute." And then I guess that PR went to, the person I wanted to speak to, and he was like, "Oh, absolutely no way. I'm like done with speaking about Limbo and everything like that." And I'm like, "Okay, no worries." So it was looking really bleak there, Liam, for a second, until through, research and whatnot, I eventually came across an animator, the only character animator to work on that game. She was a contractor at Playdead for 6 months, called I'm going to pronounce this wrong. It's either Steen or Stine Sorensen, but she was very nice, and she did me the courtesy of the cat is literally just like
we need to talk about this. A cat has just clambered up the back of your secret lab chair.
Yeah, she does that.
And she is precariously standing on top, but she was determined to get up there, and I wish her all the best in that endeavor.
She's just given birth, just 4 weeks ago gave birth to like 7 kittens, so let's let her have her fun.
She's glowing. She just, much like in the game Limbo, she really wanted to show off her physics prowess by clambering at the back of that chair.
There you go. But yeah, I spoke to Stine Sorensen, and she was really nice, and that's the other thing with this book. It's like, would it have been great to speak to the person who is kind of like most associated with the games here? I guess. But in a lot of instances, you get to hear from a lot of the people who traditionally aren't the headline developer on a lot of these games. And the Limbo chapter ended up being that. And through that, we get to hear about, the people from Limbo. I'm forgetting everybody's name now. You have to forgive me, because, they went to college together. How did they link up? And the Limbo chapter, as a little Easter egg, Stine gave something away that I'm not sure has ever been publicly reported about that game. That
Wow.
does feature towards the end of the chapter.
That's exciting.
Which, this is me selling the book. So
It's good.
if you want to know,
keep it going. Yeah.
before VGC or Eurogamer or somebody else hopefully picks up on it, you can read that little detail there. But yeah, Limbo was by far the toughest because I was just getting shut down. Not a lot of people worked on that original game, so there weren't a lot of people to interview. Thankfully, I spoke to Stine, who worked on the game for 6 months. She was very, very nice. And she was kind of like, have you spoke to this person? You spoke to this person? And I'm like, yeah, I've spoke to them. Not for very long, but I sent her the chapter and she was really happy with it. So
fantastic.
It was all good.
Oh, that's so exciting. Were there any interviews that surprised you? Any interviews where you came away being like, wow, that was brilliant? Like maybe they caught you off guard a little bit.
I know it's so easy. It's a cop-out answer, but it's so easy just to say all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like another example. So I did speak to Phil Fish very briefly via email about featuring for Fez. And unfortunately, communications broke down. I tried chasing up with him a couple of times and it didn't end up happening. But because of that, I, got to speak to Disaster Piece, Richard Vreeland, who's the composer for that game.
Oh, wow.
Through that chapter, because of his unique perspective, we get to hear about what Phil Fish was like to work with and the Phil Fish that was developing Fez. And I think, it's very easy for me to sit here and say, like, here's the person I got access to, and that's what the chapter centers around. But I think it is good to have a mix of, there is such thing as an auteur theory, right? Specifically within indie games a lot of the time. And this was an opportunity to explore things other than that. Cuphead's a good chapter of that. I get to speak to Joseph Coleman and Tina Nauricki, I believe her name is, who are two animators that talk about working with the Moldenhauers, from their sort of perspective. That's really cool. In terms of the interview that probably surprised me, Journey is one of those. Journey's the only chapter where I got to come face to face with the developer in real life.
Oh, wow.
That was Genova Chen at Gamescom one year. He was really tired. It was the end of the day. And he was like, I'm here to promote Sky. We just did this big event. We broke a record. And now you want to talk to me about Journey? And I was like, yes, please. Sorry. Is that all right? But he's got some really insightful things to say. I also got to interview Matt Nava for Journey because he was sort of my backup just in case Genova Chen wasn't available. And again, that's another instance of two people that has been well documented, or at least it is now because it's in the book, about two people that sort of bashed heads during development and how they sort of overcame that. So that I was really surprised about both candor and sort of admission about how each acted because these people were in their early to mid 20s when they're developing Journey, right? And that game is so influential.
Wild when you think about
exactly.
That.
So and it's like, should cooler heads have prevailed? Probably, but these are just people finding their feet as best they can. And I mentioned to Genova that I'd spoken to Matt Nava, and he sort of gave me that laughed it off sort of thing, and I was like, oh no, did I say something wrong? But I'm going on here, but Genova
really not.
Genova sort of talks towards the end of the chapter about just the endless messages he's had about how Journey as a game has helped them through their life, and people that have lost relatives, and how that's, Journey's helped them through that, and their own takeaways from the game. And that anecdotes like that are really special to feature in the book for me. So 2,000 words per chapter, not a whole lot to work with in the grand scheme of things, but anecdotes like that abound in the book, and that's probably something I'm the most proud of.
Yeah, I can see why. I also think it's really poignant what you're saying about how you're capturing the opinions and the stories of the people who aren't the ones that we often see telling the story. And like, I can understand that in some instances it was purely because they were the people that you could get in contact with. But yeah, I do want to hear what it was like to work with Phil Fish. I've heard Phil Fish's story quite a lot. It's nice to hear that there's like, you're still telling the story of the game, but from a slightly different perspective, from a slightly different angle. And I think when the whole concept of the book is like, this is how these games were influential, this is how they changed the world, I just think that's a really nice perspective to have to work from.
I hope so. 100%. We can only hope.
You mentioned that there's some games at the end of the book in the sort of the honorable mentions. Were there any that you were gutted ended up in that section and couldn't be in the 50?
Oh, yeah, there's another interesting story behind that. So Minecraft features in the book. Controversially, I know it as an honorable mention because, first of all, the story of Minecraft is well documented. I don't think anybody really needs any more Minecraft.
I mean, it is probably one of the most influential indie games of all time.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
But my argument with the book and what originally was the plan was, rather than speak to the people at Mojang, you know, I don't really fancy speaking to Notch.
Why?
I can't think about why.
He seems like he has normal opinions.
Seems like a pretty stand-up guy. And my sort of ethos behind that chapter, which was originally meant to feature in the 50, was that Minecraft is now the people's game. It belongs to the gamer, really. They're the people that sort of made it what it is, and the sort of industry titan it was. So I spoke to a couple of relatively high-profile YouTubers about sort of Minecraft and how it's changed like their lives and everything like that. And that chapter does exist on my drive, but me and the publisher had a talk, and it just felt incongruous with the rest of the chapters, which are all about the making of the game from the people that made them. So as hard as I tried to spin it, that, you know, the players made Minecraft what it is, which I think is 100% true.
I think it's a good take.
They're not really on the ground sort of as it happens. And it's really annoying because the year after, obviously I was sourcing interviews for the book, is when the Minecraft movie started to roll around. And I think it probably could have been possible to speak to someone from Mojang. But with all those games in the honorable mentions, it's kind of like, you know, nothing's guaranteed, nothing's set. But there's 16 honorable mentions, all of which are just as influential as those 50. And there's plenty more than even those 66. Just realized 66. Damn, that's not good, is it? Hopefully another 6 doesn't find its way in there. But my hope would be that if a follow-up book ever did happen, I could go to the people featured in that honorable mention and say, hey, look, here's what happened. Here's what I made before. Let's get you in this next one because it's definitely worth talking about.
How was it to write a book? That's such a stupid question, because I know, like you say, right? You know, it's just 50 features. By the way, crazy thing to say, because it's probably more than I've ever written my entire career, and the thought of doing that in 4 months is wild.
And all the captions, Liam, and the introduction.
Oh, goodness me. And transcribing all the interviews and finding all of the quotes to tell a story. How was it to write? Was it everything you expected? Was it better? Was it worse?
I think because it was just, that's how I categorized it in my head. Like, it's 50 features. You just got, you know, it's 2,000 words per chapter / feature, all of which is going to be driven by the responses you've managed to source. It's by no means impossible. And there were times where I'm writing chapter 8 and I'm staring at like having 42 more to write. And that was not a good feeling. I'm not going to lie. I was like, I only have to do what I've just done 42 more times. But I remember getting past 25. I could probably check what the 25th chapter I wrote was, because I numbered them in the order that I wrote them. I could probably check what it was. But after getting past that halfway milestone, it really helped a lot. It was kind of like, you just need to do what you've done again. And it's going to be harder because the games are a bit more, you know, I think I was still sourcing 1 or 2 interviews by the very end. So I wasn't sure like what would be number 49 or what would be number 50. And thankfully, that was where Lucas Pope came from. I think he was the final interview. And that was an interesting toss-up. Do I talk about Papers, Please? Do I talk about Return of the Obra Dinn? But my logic was sort of, well, by talking about Return of the Obra Dinn, we can touch upon the success of Papers, Please, which is ultimately what led to that second game. So it was just taking it day by day, and thankfully having people that understood this is what I had to do, and having a publisher that understood that, because, you know, I'm not really sure about other writers for Bitmap. I know a couple of them, how they operate, but I said to Sam, who's the owner of Bitmap Books, very really nice guy, from the off, it's like, I need a year. I need a year to make sure that this is possible before I even think about writing something up. And that's what I did, because I've spoken to people and they're like, well, why didn't you start writing, you know, midway through the year where you were sourcing interviews? It's like, well, I didn't know the book was going to exist by that point, so I would have been writing for nothing. And then those 4 months were really tough. The prospect of having to potentially go through it again is not something I'm excited by, but it was just one at a time, making it all worth it. All the while, Sam's sending me like interview mock-ups and our amazing cover that ended up coming through. And just basically, if you work hard enough, something will come. Something will arrive at the end of it. And in my case, it was this book.
How did it feel when you saw that cover for the first time?
Oh, well, obviously I got to see the mock-ups of the cover. I sketched a very rudimentary, it's so terrible.
Really?
It's basically, so I drew the numbers 50 and then sort of like said, put the characters in the numbers and sent that to Sam. And he was kind of like, okay. And then 4 months later, this a version of this came, disregarding what I was suggesting, and thank God too, because I should get, I've never met Roberto Zerdo, but he's done an amazing job with the cover here, and every game is represented by a character and or item on the book, and I love that about it. I still catch myself when looking at the cover now. I'm like, what the hell is that from? Like, I'm looking at that and I'm like, what is it from? Like Super Meat Boy, yes. Tunic, yes. Ori and the Will of the Wisps, yes. And then I've got a ship here, and I'm like, what could that be? It's 80 Days.
Yeah, of course.
So that was really cool. It was just a cool moment. If you want to see me reacting to holding the book for the first time, that's out there on my social media. And I kind of like shocked myself. Like, I was in shock. Like, when you see someone like opening something they've made for the first time, it's a bit like what we were talking about earlier about here's the feature laid out. It's like, well, surely you'd be excited. And I was excited, but I was also in shock and in disbelief that what I was holding was real. Yeah. So, and I sort of caught myself watching it back like, I wonder if people are going to be like, oh, he's a bit of a moany bastard, isn't he? Why is he not like jumping up and down? So it was such a weird feeling. Until it's in your hands, you don't know that it's real. And I've like scanned all these pages so many times and, read the chapters. Does it make sense? And all this stuff. So, another fun fact is that the founding editor of Edge, Steve Jarrett, actually edited this book. He edits a lot of bitmap books. So as soon as
interesting.
Yeah, as soon as Sam told me that, I'm like, holy shit! Like, he's gonna rip my writing apart. And sure enough, I think it was a couple of days after submitting the copy, it was like in the intro chapter, it's like, hey, just want to double check this thing with you. And from then I was like, oh, this is my life now. For the next 4 months, it's just going to be him picking apart my writing. Thankfully, after that little bump, it was pretty much plain sailing. It's quite the experience, and I still don't believe it's real, to be honest.
It's interesting seeing you hold it. It's a beautiful book. It really is absolutely stunning.
It's a coffee table book, right? And
absolutely.
Until it existed in my hands, I had trouble explaining to people like, so I think they thought it was just going to be like a generic like fiction book, not generic, but traditional. But I think in this case, knowing that what bitmap books do, this is the perfect format for a book like that, where it's like pick it up, read a chapter, put it down. Yeah. And hopefully my hope is in the process, if it's a game you know about, amazing. I'm hoping to tell you something, at least one thing you didn't know about your favorite game. And then contrastingly, if it's a game you don't know about, I want you to finish that chapter and think, hey, I need to check out that game because it sounds really cool.
Are there any games that you are now in love with from having to play them for the book?
Yeah, I really got into Enter the Gungeon like a lot to the because it's one of those Moorish games, right? Yeah, it's like that was one where I think I played it. I think my Steam play time was something like an hour and a bit, and I was like, oh yeah, this was fun. But then in researching it for the interview, that was a game that I stuck with and had to sort of like put down as I had to research and play other things for the book. Yeah. So Enter the Gungeon is definitely one of those games where I have a newfound respect for. Slay the Spire too. I'm not the biggest card battler guy, but I really got into Monster Train, and Monster Train 2 came out this year, and it's just so Moorish and I love it. But, with respect to Monster Train, there's no universe where that would be the game that is represented in the book as popularizing that genre. So I had to go and play Slay the Spire, which thankfully I claimed on PS Plus once upon a time. Played it through that. Hello. And really understood, I drank the Kool-Aid with Slay the Spire. The problem with there being so many roguelites in this book is the fact that it's like, we're not going to let you go type thing. Yeah. So I had to pull myself away from it.
This is out this week at the time of recording. People are going to have it in their hands very soon. How does that feel?
Oh, it's weird, man. It's really weird. Andy Kelly, who's a really good follow on social media, recently launched his Ridge Racer Type 4 fanzine. And he posted just like a collage of people photographing the book. And I had the thought to myself, I was kind of like, oh, I wonder if I'll be able to do that. I don't know if I will. I'd like to think I could, but that would be a surreal feeling. It was a surreal feeling seeing Edge review my book, a magazine that both of us have respected for, a long time. And it wasn't just immediately, this book's amazing, do you know what I mean? There is some criticism there. But for the most part, they understood what I was trying to get at. And similarly with Retro Gamer, when they're not misattributing me to other Bitmap book releases. Shout out to Stuart Main, author of the Hurt Me Plenty FPS book by Bitmap. But that was really nice to see, especially because I didn't know that review copies, even as PDFs, had even been sent out yet. Sort of that they would just sort of popped up, and my heart sort of sank, and I was like, oh no. But it's all been good feedback so far, and it's nice to see it out there.
It was so nice to open up Edge this month and to see the book in there, and for them to have said such nice things about it. And it was even better to open up Retro Gamer a few months ago and think, what? He wrote another Bitmap book without telling me? And I text you and I was like, oh, mate, have you written 2 of these things, you absolute nut job? And you're like, not me. That's very funny, but that's not my book.
Not me. I've still not told my publisher, or I thought about doing a funny tweet tagging Retro Gamer, but I was like, oh, they don't need that shit, even as a joke. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, you've worked in print media. You know exactly what would have caused that mistype.
Exactly. So I knew. Speaking of that, working in print media, I know that Edge give a nod to some video game book every month, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as this was on the verge of coming out, I thought oh, maybe it will be my book. So it's interesting that was the case. I don't know if that was is there any old shit video game book coming out this month? Let's see what we can get our hands on, type thing.
Absolutely not.
Who knows?
Sometimes they don't put a book in there.
No?
So
okay.
That was always an option for them. But no, I think it's a very deserving thing, and I can't wait to read it, man. Well done for doing it. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to read it. And I'm sure it's exactly the type of book our listeners will absolutely love. So definitely check that out. Link will be in the description below. That's 50 Indie Games That Changed the World by Aaron Potter for Bitmap Books. Now, before we leave, shall we move on to some very quick hyperfixations?
Let's do it.
So, Aaron, I ask everyone who comes on the podcast if they have any hyperfixations. What is your hyperfixation?
I was very tempted to say WWE right now, which I've gotten back into, of all things.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay.
I used to love it as a kid, and I'm kind of into the storylines and stuff like that. But that's a bit of once you fall down the WWE well, it's hard to get out. So I'm not going to bestow that upon anybody, that burden. I recently went to go see Weapons at the cinema, and I thought it was pretty flipping good.
I've heard very vague things about this. Can you tell me more about what it is?
Yeah, so it's essentially a sort of pseudo new school horror film from the director of Barbarian, which was a film I really enjoyed, which it was a bit more straightforward Monster in the Walls movie. And this is a bit more intriguing than that. I think ultimately I respect Barbarian for the rug pulls and the way it plays upon your expectations a bit more. But in terms of going along for the ride, Weapons is a very simple premise. It's about one night, near enough every child, except one, from a classroom, got up out of their beds at 2:17 in the morning, opened their front door and simply walked away.
Oh, God.
And very scary, obviously, especially if you're a parent, which I thankfully am not, at least to my knowledge. You can reach me at aaron.no. Books don't pay that well, so I better keep my mouth shut. But it kind of but the way it tells that story and explains it, it's very Rashomon style, where you're with a character, then you're with someone else. And I don't want to say much more than that, because this is definitely the type of quote unquote horror film that's best experienced unsullied. But I would say go watch Weapons, because it's definitely, and there's even a video game tie in that Zach Kreger's next film is a Resident Evil movie, Liam. So he's making the jump from, alter sort of low budget original stories, and he's taking a bite of the Hollywood apple. And I'm interested to see what this guy potentially can do with one of mine and your favorite franchises. It's not had the biggest success rate, obviously, Resident Evil on the big screen, but this guy sort of gives me hope, so we'll see.
That's an interesting choice, because from what I understand about his movies, they're more cerebral and sort of, well, they're not zombie flicks, right?
No.
So oh God. I honestly, what was that last one? You reviewed it, didn't you? You went, did you go see a press screening of it?
Yeah, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City.
That was that piece of shit.
Yeah, that was it, yeah. But I'm glad I went to see it at Sony offices because Mark Kermode sat 2 seats over from me. So that was quite a surreal experience.
Yeah.
And I
forgot about that.
Got to share a lift with him after, and he was like, what did we all think of that then? And I was like, not great. Yeah, that film was hampered by its budget, and it was a bit all over the place, and there was too much going on.
Yeah.
The best Resident Evil film is Apocalypse, the second one, and I stand by that. I have a lot of fun with Resident Evil Apocalypse.
Yeah, that's the one in Raccoon City, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever gone on the record about my opinion about those Resident Evil movies, but shocker, I quite like most of them for what they are. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting to see because he's already been on record, the director, and said like none of the familiar characters like Leon are going to appear in the movie. So then it kind of makes you think like, okay, are we going to have another like Alice situation again? Hopefully not. I think it's just going to be a horror story. My hope would be a horror story that just so happens to take place in the world of Resident Evil.
That'd be brilliant.
Kind of doing something like Resident Evil 7 did, where it's got the name Resident Evil on it, but for the majority of that story, it's a pretty creepy standalone tale.
Yeah. Oh, that's quite exciting. I'm a massive wuss. Would I like weapons?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it is 18 rated, but in terms of the scares, there's like 1 or 2 jump scares. Again, I don't.
If you can't see anything, it's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I don't want. All I'll say is that I don't think there's a quote unquote monster in it. So you're not waiting for it to arrive. It's a lot more. It's cleverer than that. So I think you could hack it. It gets a bit gory. That's all I'll say at points.
That's fair. Okay. Oh, nice. That's a fun hyperfixation. And you could have said wrestling because I recently got into it for the first time in my life, like 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago? Yeah. Was that SummerSlam?
Yeah. No, it wasn't. It wasn't WWE. A friend of mine, I've already told this on the podcast, I'll be brief, but some friends of ours were like, come see this like local wrestling promotion. So Yoli and I went, and it just absolutely just broke my mind. It was the most fun evening I think I've ever had out.
Were the crowd into it? Because I've been to those things. The crowd
was so into it.
Good. Because there's nothing worse than just like a silent crowd and the mat just being slammed and, you know.
I can't even imagine that. That would be wild. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the pod. It's been such a pleasure to have you here and to hear you talk about this book. I genuinely can't wait to read it. Like I say, description, in the episode description, you can find a link to buy it. But yeah, where can people find you if they want to see more of your work?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me. Sorry for chewing your ear for close to 2 hours now.
An absolute pleasure.
A Geordie and a Bristolian walk into a podcast suite, and this is what you get.
Talk about print media.
There you go. You can find me, unfortunately, I am still on Twitter because I've got a book to push, people, so I'm very sorry about that, but it's at It's Me, Aaron P, on Twitter, or on Blue Sky. If you just type my name, Aaron Potter, hopefully it'll come up, aaronpotter.bluesky.social, and you can find me there. And just go for the book, go to bitmapbooks.com, and by the time you're hearing this, you'll be able to buy it, not just pre-order. So buy it, read it, leave a very nice review, please. Stop yelling at me about why your favorite game isn't in it. Thank you.
Hey man, you got Vampire Survivors in there. You're good in my books.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, well, thank you so much again, and thank you for listening, and we'll be back very soon with more. Bye for now.
Bye.
Indieventure is a video games podcast created, produced, hosted, and edited by Rachel Watts, Rebecca Jones, and me, Liam Richardson. For more information, including a list of every game we mentioned in this episode, make sure to check out our website, indieventurepodcast.co.uk. You can get in touch by sending your questions, comments, and feedback to contact@indieventurepodcast.co.uk. You can support the show by rating us 5 stars and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast provider of choice. Some of the games we talk about on the show may have been provided to us for free for review consideration. Our intro music and stings were composed for us by Ollie Newbury. Check the episode description to hear more of his excellent tunes. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks for another episode of Indieventure. Bye for now.